Welcome to Seated Around the House, a podcast for housing professionals brought to you by the Professional Development Committee of the Southeastern Association of Housing Officers, CHO. My name is Miguel. My pronouns are he, him. I am a residence life coordinator at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville, and I will be your host for this episode. Today's topic is responsible use of AI in housing and residence life. We'll be exploring how artificial intelligence and generative AI is shaping our work, what's exciting, what's complicated, and how can we use it ethically while keeping students and staff at the center of everything we do. Before we begin, I want you to know that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views, positions, or policies of any college, university, employer, or professional association. All discussions are intended for general information, education, and dialogue. No podcast content should be considered official communication or policy guidelines from any institution. Any examples discussed have been generalized, de-identified, or fictionalized to protect privacy. Participation in this podcast is voluntary, and the host reserves the right to edit recordings for clarity, privacy, and legal compliance. With that being said, let us have our guests introduce yourselves. Please share your name, your role, and your institution if you're comfortable. And to warm us up, please share what was your first experience with generative AI?
Hello, my name is Claire Bailey. I use the pronoun she, her, hers, and I do work at Florida State University, in the University Housing Department. And then my first experience with I would have to say, it was just by happenstance type of thing. And everyone was talking about ChatGPT, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I asked it a random question, and I was like, okay, cool. This is fun. So that was my first experience with it.
And hello, my name is Cooper Hicks. I am a residence life coordinator at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I would say my first experience was pretty recent. It was while I was in grad school. We had kind of talked about expectations when we were doing the syllabus, and they talked about generative AI, and I started looking a little more into it, and I was like, why didn't I know about this while I was in undergrad? So I started learning a little bit more about it and how we applied it in my degree program.
Nice. Thank you all for sharing. And for myself, my first experience with generative AI was I like to tell people it was through an episode of South Park about 3 years ago where they used it in the South Park episode. But before, probably knew about it maybe about 2 weeks. And then I was like, oh, I looked into it. I was kind of interested. But then once the South Park episode came out, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So to kind of ground today's conversation, I do kind of want to start off with the big picture. AI, especially generative AI, is becoming part of everyday life, especially in higher education, whether that's drafting emails, brainstorming programs, reviewing large amounts of information quickly, or helping us design training materials. Thus, we as higher ed professionals have a layer of responsibility to protect student data, maintain trust, and also keep that human element of our work, at the heart of our work. So this episode really isn't about convincing people to use AI or to not use AI. It's just really about helping us think about how can we use AI, especially generative AI, responsibly, ethically, and intentionally. So whether we intend it or not, AI is going to become part of our workflow in higher ed if it's not already. First, I want to talk about what is the useful side of AI. So, our first question that I have is what are some ways AI has helped you in your work so far?
Yeah, I can jump on that. I think for me, like event planning is something I really enjoy doing and a part of our curriculum. And so utilizing the curriculum and trying to come up with like fun and unique ideas. I like normally always have them anyways, you know what I mean? But like trying to put a spin on them because I have been doing it for like some time because I was an RA back in the day too. And so like wanting to like change it up on like what I'm giving out to the like my students when it comes to programming or like what I can add to a program that has been well as the most that like I have found it the most beneficial when it comes to my job. And then Also, grammatically, I'm not the best at that sometimes. And so I'm like, make this sound a little bit better, right? And of course, like if there's like identifying things, I take that out because that's like really important. And I'll add that in after the fact. But like the bulk of the message, I will ask it to be like, can you make this sound better? Because it's not sounding that great to me. So.
I will say I've used it for the exact same reason. There's been a couple times where I've like write an email that I need to sound quite pointed, but also professional at the same time. So I'm like, hey, can you clean this up, but still kind of like keep my message a part of it? I would say like currently in my role, I've done different things with in a different committee where we're working on our different strategies and programs and kind of getting data from that, seeing what's successful in our different areas, seeing what students attend more. So AI has been pretty helpful in that because we have quite a few students who live on our campus. So it would take a lot of my time dedicated to that, pulling all this information and building a lot of these graphs myself. So I've been kind of using it saying like, what trends do you see? So I could see if maybe in one of our areas, maybe painting is very popular. So it can help us better program for our residents and different things like that, and can kind of free up my time so I can dedicate it on actually producing these events instead of crunching the data and then being able to present it at the end of the semester. I can actually work on it like a week later because I'm like, oh, the data didn't take that long to produce. So it's helped me save a lot of my time, honestly, and sometimes it helps me realize things I might not have seen myself.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
I mean, I agree with both of y'all. Like, and writing emails and making my emails sound more professional. My favorite prompt to use was Copilot. Luckily, like my Copilot's tied into my Outlook, and so it's like, hey, rewrite this for clarity in a friendly and professional manner. It's my favorite prompt because I'll write an email just kind of saying what I need to say first and getting those thoughts out, and then I'm like, okay, let's take out the things I probably shouldn't say first, and then have it rewrite it from there. And then also, one of the things I find helpful is in creating some student staff training materials. So we like to do a lot of scenarios, different types of role play, and thus I have used, different generative AI tools to kind of help craft those scenarios, to kind of write them out, whether that's based around, you go there's a party and you have to go confront it, or someone's not violating, or if someone's violating quiet hours, or they have an unapproved animal. So it's been very helpful in creating those scenarios so I don't have to think of them off the top of my head, or, also not have to use some experiences that were like, oh, these is actually true, but let me fictionalize it a little bit, right? To kind of help protect. Because if I use a certain scenario, if I talk about a party where there was 20 people, oh, they know that's the one that happened in this building, and I'm like, let's not use that scenario. Because student staff, they talk and they kind of hear, it's like, oh yeah, we know about that 20-person party where they were packed in there. I was like, okay, great.
Yeah,
So we
it's
talked a
really
little bit about how AI has saved us time. Have there's been any examples of where AI has kind of maybe sparked new ideas or has done something that you didn't quite expect?
I can go ahead. I was this semester like really pumped about planning an October event, and kind of bringing back from NASPA the like idea of an escape room event to the community. And so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do in October because I feel like it's the perfect time to do like an escape room, also around wellness as well. And that happens to be the community connection point during that month for our campus. And so trying to normally what I incorporate is like our CHA, which is our alcohol. Well, one of their areas is like alcohol information and prevention type of stuff. And I wanted other campus partners as well too involved, and ones that the students don't often see at programs or that they will pass by at the programs if they are there type of thing. And I wanted it to be intentional to the point where like to get through the escape room, you had to connect with each campus partner. And so, but like the how that was gonna happen, I was like, I don't know. I just know I have the idea and I want this to happen. And so I remember like just like or I pulled together some of my RAs at that point, and they were like, yes, all that sounds good. So I wanted their idea from the student perspective. And I was like, okay, but still the question remains of how does this actually happen? And so I like put it into the generative AI, literally like the whole like plan in my head. But like I was like, now how does this work? Like how does this happen? And thankfully they were able to, well, generative, not they, sorry, AI was able to make like a plan for me, which was really nice. And kind of set it up in a way that we moved forward from that. I had a student staff member really helping co-pilot this program with me. And we both sat down in the office and kind of just ran off of that. And then it helped us again make the booklet that the students then could utilize to get through the escape room, including the scenarios and all that type of stuff. Um, and so, I mean, we were like planning this program since August. It happened in October. It was like probably one of the best programs I've ever hosted. Won a state level award. We're going for all the awards this year for it. But yeah, I think that was like my like most proudest moment with generative AI, and seeing its full potential in helping an idea come to life.
I would say, in my experience, kind of like what I touched on in the last question, was it is just a big time saver. In my experience, I've worked with student leadership boards where we work on planning events and different like budget management. And I'm going to be completely honest, sometimes budget management and crunching numbers is not my strongest suit, especially if I want to get the most for what our budget was, because we always had to spend it by the end of the year or else we didn't receive it back the following year. So I heavily used it to see different things that I could purchase that would be long term. It gave me ideas of purchasing more like lawn games like Jumbo Jenga, Connect Four, different things like that, that were something we wouldn't buy every typical year. But since I had a little bit extra, it kind of sparked some of those ideas. Um, I would also say with programming, when I've worked with student leadership boards, I've had some that are super successful and they run themselves. And I've had some that kind of require a little bit more hands-on experience from the advisor. And I've used generative AI to help plan like schedules and different things like that because even if I was working in like a grad position or as a full-time, sometimes you just do not have the full capacity to be able to spend a lot of your time working on a schedule like that, presenting the schedule and then following through with it. So generative AI has been able to help me with a lot of like the tedious tasks that I 100% can do. But if I need to have some sort of work-life balance, that is where it's best. I'm more willing to put generative AI work out there because that is kind of a good resource that it has. It can see different things, schedule people differently, and maximize budgets. It's done a lot for me in that regard, making sure I'm not making bad purchases and then I can use my full budget.
Very nice. So both of you discuss examples of how generative AI can help you with, kind of thinking about how do I make this idea happen, helping you make sure you're utilizing your budget to the fullest potential. And we've also discussed how it's been a time saver as well, help you do those tedious tasks, to do those tedious tasks. So on the flip side of that, are there certain things that you feel like should always be human led or human driven?
I think something is that you're never gonna get that personal touch on things. And so rereading, like especially like emails, that like I run through to make sure it sounds professional, but still that it has that touch of me in it. And then like definitely like I wouldn't use it for like anything like conduct related. Like if you're trying to figure out how to say something in like a charge letter or stuff like that. Not a recommendation on my end because you just never know what it might do with some of the information still, even if you don't use identifying information. Um, so that I would kind of stay away from. Not kind of,
I
yeah.
definitely agree with like the personal touch on things. I do go over some of the emails to make sure they don't sound like robotic and very like cold, which I've had success, but there are been some times where I've like, I'm gonna cut that. I've even had times where like I've gone to Taco Bell and the drive-through is AI and they're ordering through that. So things like that, human interaction, I think in arising classes of where some students are very uncomfortable with interaction. I feel like cutting that is a horrible thing to do. We want to keep that interaction happening. So I feel like definitely with like different communication where let's meet. AI is not going to hold that meeting for us. So like keeping human interaction in most settings and using it for more like using generative AI more as a guide and like a helping tool instead of taking over a role. Um, Kind of going back to that drive-through example, I'm sure there's someone listening, but it's kind of taking over that role and you're talking to the generative AI. I'd much rather talk to the person's work there, they can do their job, and it's more as a tool.
Very nice. Thank you both. So now I want to move to sort of the ethical side of AI use. I believe one of our responsibilities that we have in housing is to protect student privacy, student data, and avoid anything that puts our staff or residents at risk. Claire, you've already kind of discussed about, not using identifying information and whatnot. And then also for myself, I choose to use Copilot a lot if I have to review data, because with our Copilot license that we have or that I currently have, is it doesn't keep that data and whatnot. So I think to start us off, let's discuss, what does responsible use of AI mean to you?
You want to go first?
Oh, sure, I can
You
start.
go first.
Um, I would say responsible use is kind of going hand in hand with like fact checking, because I hear in different articles and researchers all the time are talking about how generative AI is still being trained. It is not the know all be all, so it is pulling from a ton of different sources to where you should still be fact checking. It's kind of like when professors say Wikipedia is not the best source. So like just don't take it as the law, like whatever you get from it, you always want to double check stuff. Responsible use is not letting it fully take over everything and like remove you from the role. I can still type an email up to a student that can sound nice and have the approachable tone. Sometimes it's easier just to plug it right in there, so it does make it a little quicker, but I can't rely on that to where in 10 years I lose that skill. So still working on our skill, using it as a helping tool and not replacing what we know and what we've learned, and using it to keep us from learning in future experiences.
No, I agree with that. And I also think like responsible use is like also like making sure that, especially if you're using it within the role of like making sure I can't like take explain enough, but like um the information that identifies people, like making sure that that is taken out when you're using those items if you can, or like where you can, especially if it's like a written thing. I've never done it with data. That's something I would be interested in like learning more about. So I can't talk on that perspective. But when it comes to how best to respond to the email, because like you said, like I can still respond to the email, but sometimes it's a little bit harder to like make sure that it's coming across both how I need it to, but also accountability wise, right? Um, and then I think also is not relying on it either. And so like we're still program people, like we still plan events, we still host building community things and focus on the residential curriculum aspects of things. And that's our knowledge area that we come from in housing. Whether we came through the housing pipeline or we've come to housing from a different pipeline. Um, you still got trained in that some way, somehow that you're here today. And so letting that be the base knowledge and not relying solely on generative AI to tell you how to do your job per se, right? Um, you were hired for a reason, you were selected for a reason for the position, and making that a part of who you are and how you use AI too.
Nice. I think both of you brought up some great points. The only thing I would add is, for myself, I'm very transparent about my AI use. I've been using it for 3 years, and the joke in the office for the longest time, I think this was before Cooper got here, was, "Oh, Miguel's assistant did this," and so it got to a point where I had to explain, "No, no, Miguel's assistant didn't do this one. I did this one." And so that was a running joke for a while and whatnot. But I'm very transparent about when I do use AI, especially if someone asks me about it, I'd be like, "Oh no, AI came up with these scenarios, but I did fact check it and make sure I made them more relatable to our current institution or to our department and whatnot." Cooper, you touched on this a little bit about, about kind of what risks should housing professionals be aware of when you were discussing about keeping your skill set sharp, like how you discussed that you can still write an email if you have to. But for both of you, what other risks do you believe housing professionals should be aware of when it comes to generative AI?
I would say a big risk, we've kind of highlighted it in a couple questions, is keeping everything private. So that's why I've learned a lot about different AI platforms. Some can be private and like for schools and used only that way. Sometimes it's not. And you are helping train all of generative AI, and that information's public. I did a presentation once in my past on AI and talking about it and how it can be used in the medical field and mental health field. And we were talking about some of the ethical concerns with that because they weren't necessarily looking into different platforms and what can be more private and stuff. So they're chatting with something who can give them the advice because they are accessing all this information, but it is definitely out there for someone to find, someone to use. So I would say privacy is a big one that housing has to be concerned with. You could easily copy and paste a roommate issue email into generative AI and say, how would you respond to this? Sometimes that information includes a student's ID number, includes their last name. Generative AI has that now. There's been times where I've accidentally included my signature in an email I wanted it to clean, and it fully knows my name, it knows the university I work at, and it'll automatically address it as that. And I haven't even said that to it. So there are certain concerns of like watching exactly what you copy and paste, even if you don't want it to know about yourself, it most likely does. So being mindful of what you paste into it.
Yeah. I think also personability with the work that we do, that's a big part of our job is to be a person to connect with, and that our students feel they can come to and talk to us, whether that's our students that live on campus or our student staff or our student leaders, um, being that warm face and that warm body, but more than that too, of being that person of who you are that you can connect on a level of understanding at least, to be like, yes, I'm a person too, and I'm here for you, and I'm gonna get you through whatever times you're going through. But if they're reaching out to you in a time of crisis and your response is very surface level because of the generative AI, that you are making sure that you are getting all of the legal aspects covered, if it is like legal based information also. And you want to make sure like there are protocols that happen at each institution, and sometimes you want to make sure that that has gotten into the email chain as well. But at the same time, making sure that if you do use that generative AI, that you are following it up with making sure that that personability is in there so that when they come to you in the office or they run into you on campus somewhere or walking through the building, that it's not like, oh, I don't really know her. Whereas they're like, oh, that's Claire. I know Claire. She helped me the other week. And I feel comfortable coming to talk to her because of the response that she gave me. And most of the time, like if I am emailing, I will still follow up, whether it's like with an RA that follows up for me or myself follows up with that student type of thing. Depending on what the situation is currently active at, you know. But I try to connect with the student in person as well so they know that like an email is not the only thing they're getting from me. Because I think that that can definitely be lost, that personability within that role, if we rely heavily on just AI usage.
Totally agree. I think for myself, something I always preach is just not blind copying, pasting, whatever generative AI gives you the first time. You need to go through it, triple check it for, because AI can be biased, it can get facts wrong. The example I like to use is I was wanting to create a training scenario, and I was like, let's use popular culture. Let's use Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's like, okay, create the scenario. Two of the characters, Terry and Rosa, are in a conflict. You actually use something from the show, and it gave me an example, and I'm like, what episode was this one from? Because I know my episodes pretty well, and so it was like, I made this up. I'm like, I thought you did. And so the example was still good, but I kind of wanted to use a real example so that way I can go pull the video clip from it. Um, and so, it was one of those issues where you really need to double check and triple check. If you wanted to create a fictional scenario, it did that, but I kind of wanted to use something that was real and whatnot. Um, One more thing I want to talk about when it comes to kind of ethical and responsible use is what boundaries do y'all personally set when using AI? So we discussed sort of already making sure we're not putting any private or sensitive information. For myself, one of the things I'm trying not to do is, try not to follow the trends. So the more recent one was like the caricature trend, where everyone's like, "Oh, let's make a caricature of yourself based on what you know about me," right? And then Studio Ghibli was popular a couple years ago. And then one trend that I did fall for though was the Talking Baby AI when that trend was popular. So for myself, I always try not to follow those fun trends. I try and use AI for like work, just because the energy output that it takes on the servers and it not being good for our environment. I want to make sure I limit my fun use so I can use it for my work and help save time. But what about y'all? What boundaries do you personally set when using AI?
This is something that like when I saw the question, I was like, oh, this is a good question to like think about. Not one I thought about. You know what I mean? I do fall for the fun ones, okay? I will fully admit that there is a character out of me. It messed up and made me a guy at one point even, okay? So, and then I was a software developer. So if that tells you anything that I ask AI stuff. And I was like, neither of those are what I do, but it's fine. And so I think something that I do though when it comes to the job is I try to always come up with the idea. Like I want the idea to be an idea that I have and not like fully create it based off of the AI, but more so built with support from it type of thing of like how can I make this idea better? Or like I'm terrible at coming up with names of things. I can make a name, but I am not like coming up with the bestest name. My code does a really good job at coming up with fun names on her own, but I still like to have that funness to a event name, and so I do use that. And that's like typically where I will like kind of draw like the baseline, unless I'm like really stuck on like what else can be done at this event, then make it more neat, like more, sorry, relatable to the students.
For boundaries, I would say I'm pretty similar with I don't use it for a big chunk of my work. Honestly, email and some data stuff is the main portion. For a little bit, I was kind of against AI until I learned a little more about it. It was more because I just wasn't willing to learn about it. So I learned a little more about it. I've done presentations on it. I would say one of my biggest boundaries, this is a random one, but I always say thank you. After I type something in the prompt, I always make sure I say thank you, just in case one day it does get too smart. So I say thank you, I say hello when I start my prompts. That is something I strictly do every single time. Um, and I would say another boundary is whenever I do use it for something like an email, most of the time I rewrite it. I use that because I like that it adds a little more. I'm kind of biased when it comes to a lengthy email. I love a lengthy email sometimes, and sometimes it'll give me that. And so then I use that as a guide and then I will rewrite it because I'm a writer to where it is in my personal tone of voice. I write like I talk. So I like my emails to reflect that in some of the things. And some of the emails I read, and I'm like, you can so tell that wasn't me. So I use it as a guide, and it kind of just helps me in that way because there will be one of those times, I think Miguel touched on this point, where I might accidentally copy and paste it, and then I notice something is so inaccurate in it. So I reread through it a lot, and then I change a lot of things. I'm like, I wouldn't say that. Because it does it throws in some very nice large words, but if it's going to a student who knows me, they know that's not in my vocabulary.
No, I love that. I remember the one time I like definitely didn't read through what it responded and I used it type of thing because we were at that point of like planning that October event for the booklet part where it was like crunch time. And I was like, I cannot figure this one out. Just copy paste this one, it's fine. And the person in charge of that room, like I have a close relationship with them, but they were like, you realize this is the answers. This isn't the puzzle. And I was like, good to know. I'll change that next year. So
All right. So I think this is actually a good segue into our next topic, talking about AI and how students are using it. So we all supervise student staff. We all work with residents, at least all three of us. So, of course, not only are we using generative AI, but I mean, it is safe to assume that AI is becoming a major part of how students learn, communicate, and complete your work. So, from your perspective, what do you think is the role of AI among students, specifically student staff?
my student staff, I feel like generally are like not they don't really want to use it. Because like I remember talking about the character trend, like bringing that back, right? I was like, oh, you guys should do this. I'll make a fun like door deck with this, right? Send me your like pics. And then like one of them was like, Claire, I'm not doing that. And I was like, oh, what? Like generally, I just didn't put two and two together at that point. And they're like, because it's just not like it's not me, and I'm more of an environmentally friendly person, and like I just don't use that type of stuff. And then a couple were like, how do I even make an account on like the systems? And I was like, oh, okay. So the like student staff that I've interacted with like don't use it, or I have them using like not I have them using, but like or I have the ones that use it to come up again with what I hear in like housing side is like ideas for their events and ideas for names of things or social like to have staff socials and bonding things to do.
I would say I'm pretty similar with my staffs I've had before and current. Uh, it's kind of a mix. Some use it. I'm sure some use it and say they don't use it. But there are some times like I have had RAs that have made door decks with AI. I'm not gonna lie, my set of door decks I made recently were my cat through AI. So I have used it for certain things like that. And then I do have the few that are like absolutely not, I will not use this. I do think certain things it can help with like admin tasks, like whenever one-on-ones come up and stuff like that. I have some residents who will avoid us like the plague. So I can mention to the RAs, I'm like, hey, maybe ask different ways that you can approach someone who's avoiding you as like an RA. It can give you different tips that maybe I might miss. I was an RA during COVID time, so like I'm kind of used to getting in touch with people who don't want to talk to me. But AI can definitely help a little more in certain areas like that. It can prompt them on things that they can ask them. Uh, in the role specifically, I would say that's a big thing. I kind of would like them to keep away incident report writing from AI. That has a lot of student information that we probably don't want them to have in there. Um, but it can definitely help with like grammatical things. If they might have modules that they have to do over the summer or different tasks for staff. It can help clean up their work a little bit. It can help them best represent the RA job on their resume, different things like that. So I would say that's probably a big way I would see it in the role, but it is definitely still new, probably to some of the student staff members, to where they're either on the fence like I used to be about it, or they use it for different reasons, or they use it and just don't tell us.
Very interesting. So kind of a follow-up to that. So this is I have two questions for y'all. Feel free to either answer either or. But what do you feel that student staff need to understand about the ethical or safe use of AI? And also, what are some limits that you think we should put in place for student staff?
I think Cooper hit on it. The incident report writing one, I know that that's something we harp on is like, do not, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just please stay away from it when it comes to AI, for incident reports because you might just like, and I mean, I guess I've been writing incident reports for quite a while, so I don't see the need to have the AI part of it. Because it's in third person, so it's like you're telling a story. So I think when I think about it, I'm like, oh, I would have never even thought to use it for AI, like to use generative AI for it is what I mean. I'm sorry. But I guess it's something that's like second nature to some of our students too. They're growing with it. And it's not something I've grown with. I've grown into it, but not with it, right? And so it's something that definitely like came around, I feel like more this year, of, like, do not put incident reports into the AI system. Like it's just not gonna happen. And so I think that's the big limit that I believe that should stay in place. Um, how do we keep it accountable? I'm not sure. 100% don't know. But I think that that's one that we can explain more during trainings and things on like why it's not safe and why it's not ethical to use it. But I know it's definitely something that has been like, don't do it.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely just letting them use it as more of a guide and like a helping tool instead of replacing certain things when it comes to like interactions with residents, different things like that. It can maybe help you approach, like if you don't have a chance to talk to your supervisor before you go into a roommate mediation, that might help give you some starting prompts to start the conversation. So I would say like that's more of an ethical use. Having it replace the conversation is not. And I would say, but we do have some student staff members who are maybe not the most crafty, so generative AI can be helpful. I don't want them to think that that's replacing that part and that you could be the craftiest person on the earth and you still want to use that. I still like the handmade door decks. Sometimes I like them better than the ones that are made through AI. So I don't want some people to replace certain things that are pretty common with this job.
Mhm.
But I would say some limits are definitely no student information. Whatever limits the professional staff and full-time staff have, I think student staff should have to abide by it. If there's a specific platform that the school has to use, student staff members should be the ones using that. In case there is a slip up and someone's name is accidentally attached to something, at least we know it's secured by the school and it's only being seen by school people. Um, so I would say like that's one of the biggest limits. And then also for like holding accountable, I do understand like it is going to be kind of a hard one to manage. And it is sometimes hard. I've had times where I've read someone's module and I'm like, this is so AI. I've asked ChatGPT, did you write this? And it said no. And then I plug it into an AI calculator and it said 100% completed by AI. So ChatGPT does know how to lie. So kind of questioning it if you do see it, but sometimes people do write like that, but you can tell because it's very professional. And if they're maybe not the most professional incident report writer, maybe it's time to look at like, how'd you write this so perfectly? So setting some limits there so we don't have to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think Cooper, you brought up a good point because we have them complete modules before they do this job, and one of the things we did this year was being transparent about AI use and like setting the limits. Like you can use AI if you need to generate ideas, if you would like to maybe clear up your writing, but do not have it write for you. You write first, and then if you want it to, kind of check your grammar, sure, go for it. Uh, so we were setting up limits on like, okay, you can use AI because we use AI. We're honest. Like some of your modules were created with AI. And so being honest about that and being like, hey, here are the guardrails that you should use because this will help protect you, help keep you safe and whatnot. Also, this is the way we want you to use it because we don't want you to lose that human element and whatnot And then going to the accountability piece, honestly, like Cooper said, it is talking to the student who wrote this or the student staff member and letting them know, hey, be honest with me. Did you write this? Okay, you did. Why did you take this shortcut? What can we do to maybe not let you do this, right? We don't want you to fall into this pattern where you're relying on it and you cannot function without it, right? And so being honest about like, what do we want? Like, we want you to use it if you if you get stuck, because I get stuck and I need to help brainstorming. Because I don't know what I want to do for a program, or I have all the student data that, and then I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. And then I look, I put it into Copilot or something, and then it's like, oh, your residents love to do crafts. Great. I'm going to have a crafting area wide, right? That's how we want them to use AI. So it's being very honest and transparent about like, this is what we want you to use it for. Here's what we don't want you to use it for. Don't put student names in here. Protect their data, take out any identifying information. So similar to the limits that I place on myself, those are the limits that kind of work with student staff and place on them as well. So this kind of goes into the next question, really kind of talking about guardrails, limits, and whatnot. Do y'all believe that departments should create AI guidelines for staff? And if so, what should they include?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Miguel, when you were explaining it. Like how you guys set it up for your student staff during their modules. I think that's a really good and like fair, easy way to do that. Because it sets that like bottom level expectation of like how to use it, safe rails as well. Because I think as AI grows, we're gonna always be learning and growing alongside it. And it's fluid, like it can be something that can change as it goes, but setting those like this is what we know as of now, and like we know that student name shouldn't be in there, we know that student identifier stuff shouldn't be going in, and then maybe even pronouns shouldn't be going in. I don't for sure know, right? But different things along those lines, like those basic core elements type of thing.
I've looked into this. You can also ask generative AI to create its own guidelines, because it knows what reasons it probably shouldn't be used. But I do agree. I think I do enjoy like when guidelines are set because some people will just let it create everything that they're looking for. Um, and I do think it should include like we need to see some portion of you actually attempting it, even if that's like you creating some creative prompt to get this result from it. There needs to be some effort of our work put into it because we can't just trust the generative AI to do our part because then we can't prove that it can do our job because then maybe one day our job won't exist. But it's basically, I think, like Claire said, Miguel, you did hit it right on the head. I do like that there's generative things, and then we can have that conversation if someone does kind of take advantage of the expectations or they find a large gray area. And since AI changes every single day, it gets a little more accurate every single day, it is going to be one of those guidelines where like work with us as it changes. We're changing too, but it is something that is probably a positive thing to keep monitoring. So eventually one day it isn't just fully AI everything. Your housing rooms are selected through AI, different things like that. We still want to keep us in the role to prevent it from making those mistakes. So I think guidelines are definitely beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. Like with the guidelines and whatnot, whether you set them for yourself, your student staff, or if your department helps set them. I think the only thing I would add is just working with your IT departments and knowing what are the quote safer tools to use. So at my current institution, we love Copilot, we love Microsoft because we know that protects the data. I seen a couple emails where they asked us not to use certain apps because it doesn't protect the data, the privacy as well. We don't have the license with that particular app or a particular app, so they're like, "Hey, don't use this, please." I remember there was a issue with like note taking apps and whatnot. So they asked us specifically, like, make sure if you're using note taking apps, use the ones that are embedded into Teams already and whatnot. Don't use a particular other one. And so I think, working in collaboration with your IT departments, because, in reality, they're the IT experts, right? And so working with the experts in these situations is important. So with that being said, I kind of want to look towards the future of AI in housing and residence life. So as we look into the future, what is something that excites you or concerns you about how generative AI might evolve?
Think excites is like the I really love icebreakers and like team builders type of stuff. I think AI can definitely come up with some fun new ones or like spins on what we currently know. Because I feel like we've all been around the block. I know Cooper, you said you were a RA in COVID. I was a grad assistant at that point in COVID times, but I was like still like we've been around the block. We know some of like a lot of the team builders that we use, but sometimes you're like, I don't want to do the normal, the same old ones, right? So maybe coming up with those same ideas. Or the other thing that excites me is the programs because I've seen it work so well on helping develop a program. And while it is like based in obviously like my knowledge and what I wanted it to like how it to occur, it still helped make that action plan possible, right? And so I think that that excites me because it allows then for residential curriculum to be more not robust, isn't the right word, more detailed, and more have more of like this is how we can make these things better and and make it bigger, better and bigger. And while everything's not better and bigger, if it is bigger, but I think that residential curriculum can always benefit from those intricacies coming into it to help with the programmatic pieces of it so that we're getting those fun programs but putting spins on the ones that we've already done or used before in the past and now putting a new spin on it to make it even better than it was before.
Something that I would say excites me, leaning a little more on like the housing operations side. I did a presentation on generative AI and how it can be applied in different settings of housing. And I think something that excites me with it is I love a modernized building and different like high tech things that it can do. And there were different studies on how schools are applying AI into buildings. It can track high traffic areas within buildings, so it knows when to brighten the lights and when to dim them. Some schools have implemented it in their roommate selection process. So like they come up with a different survey or group of questions, and then AI can use that information to best select roommates. And it can really help with the operations team of lightening their load a little bit and having these conversations, starting a roommate exchange process if they do something like that. And it can really hopefully prevent future roommate issues that could come up in the fall or spring semester. So it's really exciting to see how it can be applied because we've said before, we're not going to get away from this. It's going to continue to affect our lives. So I like to see the different ways that it can be applied. And especially with it not being the best for the environment, I think it is a semi-positive that some schools are able to use it with lighting and to make their buildings a little more eco-friendly and being able to predict things like the lights, like I said. So that was one of the things that I thought was really impressive. And something that I think is going a little more back to the residence life and crisis response side of it, making sure there is like a secure platform, but also in those mental health crisis moments, if there's not maybe a counselor on call or we aren't able to get in contact with someone, it can kind of help within the immediate, like give us even tips, maybe not ask the student in a crisis moment, hey, can you look on AI? But like maybe we can like pop up on our phone and find different breathing exercises, maybe help someone through a panic attack. So I feel like that's kind of exciting because it'll also just make us a little more helpful in those situations. If we're waiting for our campus police to get there or something, we can try and talk them through it and try and figure out what's going on. So that's kind of exciting to me is to help make our job semi easier and just give us more experience with it.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, I think the thing that excites me is the thing that also concerns me, is the evolution of generative AI, the new tools that are coming out. So, we talk a lot about when generative AI, I think people mostly think about ChatGPT, Copilot, but then there's the generative AI that can create music, that can create videos. If you haven't seen the new Sea Dance that just came out, I mean, it's out here creating superhero videos that look pretty darn good. And you can also there's generative AI that will help create presentations for you. So I'm concerned about like the way it's progressing, but also I'm excited about the different ways I can use it. So I can have the chatbot AI kind of help create an outline for me, but then I can use a different presentation AI to help create the actual presentation. I could use a image AI to create maybe a comic book strip of a training scenario that the chatbot AI recreated. And so I'm very excited about the different ways you can integrate different AIs to help figure out what kind of product you use. So myself, I like to use it a lot for trainings and whatnot. So like, all right, come up with a scenario, come up with the image of the scenario, and then let's maybe animate or add some audio to the scenario. Like let's put some real voices in here, or real AI voices, which some of the AI voices are starting to sound pretty good, pretty real. And so I'm excited and concerned about both of them as it progresses, but it kind of goes into my last question that I have for you to wrap us up is what's one takeaway you hope listeners walk away with after hearing this conversation, after hearing today's conversation? So for myself, I think, just trying out different AIs, like it is scary, but, figure out what your boundaries are and, go into it with that if you haven't tried it, or if you're still new to it, just go out and practice it. You may find you don't like it and you're like, I'm just gonna do my own thing. That's fine, but go ahead and just give it a try and see what works for you and use it, and then don't use the parts that don't work for you.
Mhm. Um, that it can be fun too. Playing with it. You're gonna get different ideas and fun ideas that come out of it, and sometimes really dumb ones too, where you can just laugh at it. I don't use it for like data stuff, so I don't have like that type of side of it. And so I think that if you're not a data person or like that's not your like subspecialty, you can still use AI. And you can have fun with it in that way. It was cool hearing from both Cooper and Miguel about how they can use it for data. Didn't know that. So that's pretty cool. I think you're always learning a new way to use AI in some way and how it can benefit the future as well too.
I would say I think we all pretty much touched on this. What it's basically, even if you don't want to use it, uh, I would say my takeaway is to stay up to date on it. You're not going to get away with it. I know for a fact in 20 years I will fall for every AI video. I'm already falling for them now. So definitely, even if you don't plan to use it, keep an eye on it. Keep it in the back of your mind so you can at least keep up with it. Know how it can affect your department at least. Even if you're like so against it in your department, you need to know how students are going to be able to use it within your department, so you're able to address it. So you don't want to be 10 years down the line and then you figure out everything that it can do because it can already do quite a bit. So just keep up to date because it's changing every single day. And it's kind of probably like when the internet was introduced into schools, and now this is another hurdle that people have to jump over and figure out how it affects education and learn how we basically can work with it.
Awesome. Well, that does bring us to the end of today's episode. I want to give a huge thank you to our guests, Cooper and Claire, for being here and sharing their thoughts and for helping us think about how we can use AI to support our work while keeping the core of what we do, which is helping others, right? If you haven't yet, please check out the other episodes of Seated Around the House on Spotify and or YouTube. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you join us for our next episode. Take care and have a great day.